reports have shown that the amount of domestic violence cases and child abuse cases are beginning to really skyrocket during this time of quarantine. And the obvious question that I'm going to ask you tonight is why?
Well, you know, this was something that we knew even before going into sheltering in place. This was some of the concerns that we had for children, for women, for families. And the real issue is because all of the issues that were there prior to us being sheltered in place were going to be there once we found ourselves not being able to move. And unfortunately, it escalates. Right? We don't have those outlets. So we don't have the places and spaces that become sanctuaries, school, work, family members, social gatherings, social groups. We don't have those places and spaces. And so if our homes were powder kegs before the sheltering in place, now all the sheltering in place was really the match to light the fuse. And there are no outlets. There are no outlets for abusers who don't know how to control themselves, who don't have the coping skills in order to deal with their impulsivity or their anger or their triggers or their frustrations. And so now they have access, unfortunately, to their victims all of the time with less governance, with less eyes, with less people being able to check in and
with less accountability, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, we know that this is the case, and so many people are not safe at home.
David, I'm going to bring you in with the same issue because I guess I want to ask you a more proactive question, and that is, can anything be done? I mean, about if you're in that situation, if you find yourself, you're quarantined with an abuser, whether you are a woman or a child, can anything be done?
I mean, the hard answer is yes, but the reality of them doing something and getting out of that type of scenario is quite slim, specifically for a woman who's in a abusive type of relationship, because a part of her is choosing to be there, right? Or obviously she would never be there, right? So it's the getting away from it. Most people are used to the same type of trauma or drama, and they connect themselves to things that continue the whole cycle until they can possibly finish that cycle. But oftentimes they don't. I've known people who were caught up in these type of relationships where, you give them all the resources, but they still can't. It's not till they can see it, like you said earlier, for themselves. Nobody can just drag you out, unless there is some situation when there's physical signs of abuse. Then, I had a friend who was in an abusive relationship, and I said, look, go and tell your brother, go and tell your family, because now they're going to hold you accountable. Because if my sister came and told me that, there's no way I'm letting her go back into that, right? But at the end of the day, even still after she did that, she still wanted to go back into that situation.
I guess, David, I would push you to suggest this. I don't deny and I don't disagree that everything you just said is accurate at the most fundamental level. What I'm asking you to provide is something slightly different, and that is, are there any de-escalation resources, websites, strategies, rituals, something that people can do or embrace in the moment or after the moment or before the moment gets started, that can sort of help mitigate this? Because if it is true that these numbers are going up, right? And if it is true that we're quarantined, then leaving is not an option, whether you want to leave.
Right.
What we need tonight, and what I want to give my viewers tonight, is a sense of what they can do. How can they be empowered of what's going on?
Yeah, that's a very difficult answer. Again, it's, if I'm in a household where I see something and two, you got to understand that people aren't really consciously going after each other. This is unconscious activity. So for a person to go into some type of deactivation, they have to be conscious of their partner's triggers and things of that nature. How do I avoid not sounding the alarm? And for a kid though, that's a little bit, that's that's pretty difficult for a kid because they don't have that skill set. So I would say, you know, now you're at the internet, you have, you know, resources at your disposal. You know, look up, and that's probably more a question in terms of like certain tactics, but just look up some resources that may be beneficial in terms of like, how do I avoid this escalating thing happening in my household? But I think again, that's a very primal issue you're dealing with. It's not conscious based. So that person has to have a certain level of consciousness to be able to do that.
Well, you know, you said something earlier that I want to just reiterate. In spirit, I'm going to ask you a subsequent question. But you said something earlier, David, that I just want to reiterate, that sometimes the only thing somebody can do or prayerfully do or hopefully do is summon 20 seconds of insane courage to tell somebody what's going on. And at the very, our prayer has to be, at least mine on this show has to be, that at some point in the journey that happens. Spirit, I want to ask you a different question.
I know. I was burning though. Okay, go ahead.
If you want to jump in on that, go ahead. But
The only
I'm going to
thing,
follow up with a different one. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the only thing that I wanted to say is that it is very difficult, and I totally understand where David is coming from in that a person has to want to leave, and oftentimes in those situations, what a victim is looking to do is not necessarily leave, but to control the escalation. Right. And so she doesn't, or he doesn't want to talk to their family. They don't want to talk to friends because they're afraid of the long-term consequences, which is once I've forgiven my partner and I'm ready to go back, my family and friends won't have forgiven them and won't understand that. And so now we have a new set of issues. So it does become a huge challenge. And we also know that attempting to leave is the most dangerous time for a victim. So all of these things become very serious. But I will say that there are resources out there. You can look at, for example, RAINN, RAINN, or some of the national, the hotlines for counseling services. You can do that via text. You can do that via 800 number. But I would also say that therapy, and I have just been a huge advocate, you know, as a therapist myself, I am a huge advocate for therapy, and I am trying to encourage people not to wait until after the pandemic in order to get therapy. So if you recognize that you have a problem, or if you recognize that there's a problem in your household and you're looking for your children to be able to get services, or for you as a couple to get services, us therapists are working. We are not necessarily on the front lines unless we are in the emergency rooms, which some of us actually are, or in the hospital, some of us actually are. But as therapists, we are still working. And I see all of my clients telemental health right now, which means that individuals can get counseling services as individuals or as couples or as a family. And we actually are doing that work to teach those de-escalation techniques, to teach about those triggers, to actually do the work to heal those triggers in hopes of resolving some of these issues, because it is a crisis and this crisis is escalated in time such
Absolutely.
as this. And so whatever we can do to offer that help and that care, we are here to be able to do that even now. Nobody is ever alone.